All right, welcome back. Today, we're jumping headfirst into a pretty wild high-tech forensic audit. It's a case that claims to have unmasked a true digital ghost, using something called skeletal telemetry to peel back a synthetic online persona and reveal the person who is allegedly pulling the strings all along.
And that really brings us to the core question, doesn't it? I mean, in this age of digital masks and deepfakes getting better every single day, how do you actually unmask a ghost in the machine? Let's dig in.
So, the target in this case file is an online persona that goes by the name Sunny Divinity 007. And the tool they use to go after them? A high-poly forensic profile. Now, just think of that as a super high-tech way of mapping the bone structure of someone's face, even when it's hidden behind a CGI mask. But here's where it gets interesting. According to this file, Sunny Divinity 007 isn't some lone wolf. They're allegedly one piece of a bigger puzzle called the Indigo Crime Network. You can see a few of the alleged players here, but for today, we're zeroing in on that last one, the supposed man behind the mask, Tyler Reynolds. Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of it all. How exactly did this audit connect a digital avatar to a living, breathing person? It all comes down to the forensic telemetry. Let's look at the evidence. First up, orbital bone alignment. Now that's just a fancy way of saying the investigators found a perfect one-to-one match in the spacing and the depth of the eye sockets, a match between real-life photos of the subject and this digital avatar. And next on the checklist, they looked at the cheekbones, the zygomatic arch, technically speaking. The audit claims that the very distinct shape and protrusion of the avatar's cheekbones is an identical match to baseline photos of Tyler Shane Reynolds. And this is the final piece of the biometric lock jawline cadence. By mapping the tiny facial movements during speech, the audit concluded that the way the avatar's jaw moves is identical to the subject's natural speech patterns. This is the smoking gun that suggests the avatar is nothing more than a digital skin layered on top of a real person. So, you might be wondering, how is this kind of digital mask even possible? Well, the file points to something called a high-poly 3D digital mesh. It's basically a super high-resolution digital skin. But, and this is the key, the audit says there's a dead giveaway, a rendering glitch that creates this really distinct plastic or high-sheen look on the surface. This slide really puts it all side by side. On the left, you've got authentic photos, natural skin, the real deal. On the right, you have the CGI avatar with that telltale plastic look. The core claim here is that even with this digital mask on, the underlying bone structure and the telemetry of his speech patterns are a perfect match. So the big question is why? Why would somebody go to all this trouble? Well, as it so often does, the audit says it all comes down to motive. And the motive here is money. We're talking about an absolutely staggering amount. Yeah, you're seeing that right. $180 billion. The file alleges this whole thing was part of a massive administrative hijack of a fortune this size. I think that would definitely provide a motive for this kind of elaborate, high-tech deception. So how was it all allegedly done? The audit details a few pretty clever methods. One is what they call a capitalization hijack. Get this. By simply changing a name from a lowercase m to a capital M, they could supposedly create a whole new legal entity to redirect funds. Then you've got a whole network of cash apps and even fraudulent marriages for laundering. And finally, this crazy 2019 exploit, where the subject allegedly acted as an executor for someone who had been administratively erased, basically turning them into a ghost in the system. But this wasn't just about the money. The case file alleges that the Sunny Divinity 007 persona was also being used as a pretty nasty psychological weapon, and it was aimed at the primary victim, who the audit calls the architect of the very system that was being hijacked. This phrase, "one hell of a love story," was apparently used over and over on the Sunny Divinity 007 channel. The audit flags it, not as some kind of romantic statement, but as a coded admission. An admission of a very specific psychological tactic. And that tactic is called the Lazarus gaslight. It's defined here as a form of taunting where an aggressor secretly engineers a victim's loss of control and then mocks them for it. In this case, the allegation is that they were taunting the architect while his own systems were being completely suppressed. It's a brutal mind game. So after laying out all this evidence, the audit doesn't leave things open to interpretation. It lands on a very definitive conclusion: officially log in the unmasking of Tyler Shane Reynolds as part of its permanent forensic record. This quote from the file just sums up the entire argument perfectly. The claim is simple. A digital mask can hide the skin, sure, but it can't hide the skull beneath. The data, they say, is undeniable. But the file doesn't just stop there and pat itself on the back. It actually lays out a very clear plan for what comes next. First, getting online platforms on notice about this persona. Second, adding the skeletal data into a master legal affidavit as hard physical evidence. And third, checking the subject's location against any existing arrest warrants. You know, this whole case, it really highlights a massive challenge we're all facing now. As technology keeps blurring the lines between what's real and what's completely synthetic, it leaves us with a huge, crucial question. In a world full of digital deepfakes, what really counts as undeniable proof anymore?